Hello, friends, and welcome back to Tootie Talks, the podcast where music and conversation come together. I'm your host, Aveline Schienke, joined by my co-hosts, Kayla and Sam. And today our guest is Kyle Pitcher, a bassist, educator, and performer. In this episode, we'll talk about Kyle's journey in music, balancing teaching with performing, building classroom community, and how teaching has shaped him as a musician. Kyle, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, first thing I want to dive into is, could you just walk us through your history with music, how you got started with bass playing, where you got your degrees from, and what you're doing now career-wise?
Sure. Well, I got started probably like a lot of you guys in 6th grade music class, and I didn't actually start off as a bassist. I started off as a cellist. I was a pretty tall 6th grader, and it was a natural switch to bass. My teacher was like, "You look like you can handle this," and she was right. But the other reason I switched to bass is because I was just a little careless as a young one and broke a couple cellos without keeping track of it. One of them got run over by the car. The other one fell off the rack. So, something bigger to keep track of, I think might have been the impetus for that. But yeah, I started learning in 6th grade. I grew up in Wayland, Michigan, same place as Kayla here. And it went through school, and I ended up going to Western Michigan University for my undergraduate degree in music education. And I'm currently pursuing a degree in music ed from Michigan State University, a master's degree there.
Outside of teaching, I know you perform a little bit. What do you generally, are you like jazz? Do you do like other orchestras? Like, what do you perform as a bassist outside teaching?
Yeah, I am performing a little bit of everything these days. In school, my focus was primarily classical music. And I sub in with some regional orchestras here and there. There's the West Michigan Symphony. I will work with why am I blanking on the name of it right now? The Vintage Parlor Orchestra. I'll sub in with the Vintage Parlor Orchestra from time to time around Grand Rapids. And I will just get to play a lot of that orchestral classical stuff. Outside of that, I have kind of made a little bit of a niche for myself playing a lot of folk musics. I played with a band called The Founding for about 10 years, and this was all folks that got together. We were all in school at the same time at Western Michigan, and all in the orchestra program together, and one of us just decided, hey, I really like Celtic music, and kind of got the ball rolling, and we played for about a decade together. And at this point, that band is no longer playing, but I'm still playing a lot of folk music. Ben Travers is a musician around here who plays a lot of old-time music in particular, that I've been gigging with him a lot. And then on cello, now it's funny, I've kind of come back to performing as a cellist a little bit. I'll find myself playing some weddings here and there, and just kind of doing whatever comes up, you know what I mean? Right. It's just kind of flexible. I really enjoy being a flexible musician in that way.
How do you balance teaching and all that performing with outside the classroom?
That is a difficult task for sure. There's only 24 hours in a day, and really, I just slot it in where it fits. Being a classroom teacher, a lot of that time takes the priority in what I can do in working hours. But being able to perform where I can is just really rewarding for me. So I try as hard as I can to line the schedule up to where it works out. So how do I balance that? Carefully.
Mm-hmm. I guess along with that, how do you have time to practice?
Another $1 million question for sure. I have just told myself that I'm really trying to make a practice routine out of touching an instrument every day. So the things that I find, whether I'm playing bass or cello or some plucked string instruments, guitar, mandolin, whatever it is, I just keep them out and accessible for myself and put them in places where I'm going to be. So they're always right there. They're always kind of in the way, in a great way. So I think by proximity might be the answer to that. How do I make sure I can practice? Just staying close to it.
Yeah. Going more back to teaching, how do you choose repertoire for your classes?
For teaching?
Yes.
Ooh, that is something, I find that there's a really delicate balance for that with my classroom teaching. I currently teach at Rockford Public Schools in Rockford, Michigan, where Sam's from. Mm-hmm. And finding that it's kind of difficult to balance a lot of different needs because you have so many students in your class, right? You've got players that are just going above and beyond and are looking for more and the next more difficult thing and really trying to push themselves. And then you have those students that aren't doing as much of that and are just really liking the culture of the class and wanting to be part of a community. And so finding music that balances those needs, that can be a really tricky thing. But ways that I try and do that is I'm always listening to new repertoire, whether that is music that is just coming out or the classics that I may or may not have been exposed to in teaching prior or in my own time as a student. Just doing a lot of listening and figuring out, okay, how do I think my students would react with this? What challenges should I present to them? What sort of skills are we trying to build? So there's a lot that goes into that, and it takes a lot of time. I think more than anything, I really have to sit with a concert program, and I'll have an idea for 2 or 3 pieces, and something else will come across my way, and I'll decide, this actually will speak to these kids for this reason. And then I'll throw the program out the window and come back to something else and keep building from there. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, I enjoy that process. It can be really tedious at times if you're getting a little stuck. But that's one of the parts of being an orchestra teacher that I really get to nerd out about, I think, is choosing repertoire.
Yeah.
Are there certain pieces that you recycle for your students, meaning like every 4 years, you bring it back out and you make sure every student has at least played it once?
Ooh, yeah. There definitely are some of those. Right now, it's Andante Festivo by Sibelius. Oh. That is just such a gorgeous lyrical piece, and I feel like that kind of writing is just something that all students need to be exposed to. And the basses need to learn how to count those rests, too. As a bass player, I can definitely say that we need to learn how to count. I am currently in my 4th year at Rockford. My first teaching job, I was at Goshen Public Schools in Goshen, Indiana, and I was teaching 5th and 6th grade students. And with that, I didn't deal with the same kind of repertoire. So I'm actually just now getting to that point where I've had a set of students long enough that I can start pulling from the library out the second time. And that is the one piece that I've done that with so far in my teaching profession.
How was that adjustment going from like 6th graders to what you're doing now?
It's a bit of a difference.
Yeah.
When I graduated with my music ed degree, my undergraduate, I thought that I would be teaching high school. That was kind of my goal. That's what I found the most initial enjoyment in student teaching. The job that was available for me was teaching those 5th and 6th graders. And it took me a while to adjust to that beginner mindset, to step away from, we have to play the most rigorous music. We have to do the most. And stepping back to, I get to show these students the joy in this, right? So that became my primary responsibility with those beginners, as well as setting up good fundamental technique and everything like that. And so now teaching high schoolers primarily, I do find that there's a little bit less of having to convince students like, hey, you should be really excited about this. Because by the time they get to me as freshmen, a lot of the times they really are. They are excited to be involved in that already. And I have my middle school colleagues to thank for that, for sure. But yeah, I think I get to focus more on the technical elements of music making with high schoolers as opposed to some of the younger students. And yeah, going between being that hype man and then the diagnostician trying to make everything click. That was kind of the biggest difference between those. And there are definitely elements of both of those things in both of those jobs, but it's, the scale kind of tips a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting to me to see how teaching styles differ from like the different grade levels and stuff. So that's good to hear. When I was in high school, outside of just learning the rep, we did like circle of fifths stuff. We did scales, more technical things. Do you do any of that in your classroom at all, or what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. That is an everyday thing in my classroom. We do some technique work. I have crafted these technique books that I use with my students, and everyone kind of gets a copy at the beginning of the year. And a lot of it comes from the Habits of a Successful String Musician series. They have a really great scale page. It's got your scale fingerings, arpeggios, and some intonation chorales and exercises. And we always start class working with one element of that. Warming up with that intonation is always so good to get our ears involved, and then going to some more scales and drilling that with different rhythms and bowings and different distributions. is just really how I like to start it. And that always kind of varies on what kind of repertoire we're working on. Are we going to play this major scale in, half notes to really work on some legato, or are we going to play it with a more off the string bow stroke, or, it's kind of flexible in that way. But yeah, technique is definitely a big part of that, especially if students aren't taking private lessons outside of my classes. It's kind of my responsibility to provide that for my students, to be their private lesson instructor in some way. And that is the way that I can do that.
Yeah. I use that book too.
It's great.
It's a great book.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to just classes in general, how many orchestra classes do you teach? And do you guys have chamber orchestra or anything like that?
Yeah. So I teach 3 orchestra classes at the high school. And actually, as part of my job, I get to go assist with our 7th grade orchestra classes at each of our middle schools in the morning. And so that keeps my my pulse on the youth, I guess. You know what I mean? I get to meet the students before they come up a little bit. And by the time they're freshmen, they already know who I am and know what I'm going to do and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, we have 3 orchestra classes at Rockford High School right now. They kind of vary based upon just different ability level. We got our freshman concert orchestra, and then our middle group is the Philharmonic Orchestra. And the top group used to be the size of a chamber orchestra, but now it has grown to something bigger than that. So a symphony orchestra, if you will.
Going back to all the instruments you have laying around the house, do you have a favorite secondary instrument?
Ooh, that's tough. I mean, I have definitely several instruments that I would consider a secondary instrument. Bass guitar is probably the one I'm most proficient with, and was probably my first love as an instrument. I kind of started learning double bass and bass guitar simultaneously when I was taking lessons when I was in the 7th grade. So I guess that would have to be a favorite. But I have, in playing a lot more old time music and a lot more bluegrass adjacent stuff, I have recently come into like a mandolin and a tenor banjo, like an acoustic guitar, and have been learning some flat picking stuff. And those are quickly sneaking up. I can't really pick one of those, but playing in that style with those kinds of instruments has really become kind of another musical love of mine recently.
Oh yeah, I've also grown to love like the mandolin and the banjo in recent years. But going back to the bass, do you have a favorite classical piece you like to play or a favorite contemporary piece?
Ooh, bass repertoire. To be totally honest with you, I haven't, as a soloist, been practicing classical repertoire as much as I've been teaching. But going back to those every once in a while is always so good for us as musicians. My favorite piece is probably Bottesini's Concerto No. 2. It's a staple in the bass repertoire. That first movement, especially, it's just absolutely gorgeous. A lot of bass music is either cello transcriptions or it is stuff that's written for bass, but you don't quite find that level of virtuosity that you would in a violin or cello concerto. Violists can probably relate a little bit in some degree. So with that, I think that the Bottesini is really one of those pieces, and Bottesini as a composer is one of those that really is just had a different style of writing that you would find, and it's substantial for sure.
What about contemporary? Do you ever visit those with bass?
Some contemporary solo repertoire? Not as much, to be totally honest with you. There's the Montag Sonata that I've really enjoyed recently. Composers like Frank Proto, Anders Martin. Man, yeah, there's a lot of good bass music. Nicholas Walker, the professor at University of Michigan, a lot of his writing's fantastic.
What do you think that's something about the bass that people often misunderstand?
Something about the bass that people often misunderstand. I feel like just a lot of people don't recognize the bass's melodic abilities at first. When you're playing in the low register, it can certainly be hard to discern, but if you're really listening to the timbre and the articulation, you find something in that is just more beautiful than you would anticipate for something that low. In the upper range as well, I mean, you've certainly got a lot of ability to do things there, but I just think people overlook the sonic capabilities of it a little bit. A lot of the contemporary writing, as you were asking about too. I mean, there are so many people that are doing things now that 100 years ago people would have never imagined a bass being able to do. And so seeing where people are pushing that, going to the International Society of Bassists conventions and kind of seeing where the future of the instrument is headed, that has been really illuminating for me as not just a bassist, but as a musician, to see that, this classical music, or this instrumental music rather, that people are, may think is kind of stuck in the past a little bit. It is a very active developmental scene right now for the bass. And that's really cool to be able to experience in my lifetime.
So going back to Rockford, teaching, I know your first year was my senior year.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, at least for us, that was a major adjustment. Our previous teacher leaving to then we get a brand new teacher we don't know. What maybe is some of your advice on adjusting to a new school as a teacher for your students to build that community with new students?
That's a really good question. I would say that the most important thing to do is to not do too much at once. If you are a teacher who is coming into a school for the first time, whether it's your first school that you've ever taught at, or you're a more seasoned teacher coming into something, just trying to get to meet the students where they currently are and to respect the tradition that has already been built. I think that goes a long way in building trust at first with students. And whether, during my first year at Rockford or my first year teaching in Wayland, there were certainly things that I saw that was like, I might want to do this way. I might want to tweak how we approach these sorts of things. And I think that can all be done in due time. You just really need to allow for space for students to kind of deal with change on their own. I know in the situation with Rockford that your teacher left kind of unexpectedly over the summer, and you didn't really get that chance to, come to terms with having a new teacher, especially if it's someone you've been working with for 6 years. I mean, that's a significant portion of life, right? So there's a grieving that happens, I believe, with students, and just being open to letting that happen is also really important, while just trying to maintain positive energy moving forward. Like, yes, this is over and this happened, and, empathizing with that, but looking towards the future in the same vein is also just really a helpful thing to be able to do to try and get that to move to where I'm hoping it goes.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned keeping traditions, from previous teachers or something. But I know in your first year, you let us pick a major piece. We played 5 variants of Dives and Lazarus. You totally just that wasn't even on your radar, and you just let us choose it. We played it. You let that be our senior piece, right? And you also did what did we do? Class superlatives, where we all voted for.
Those are good.
Yeah, most likely whatever. I got Mr. Pitcher lookalike. I remember that. So yeah. So I guess more on specific classroom community outside of music. What do you do to help the students mesh together?
Ooh. One of the best things in my experience, for having students build community with one another is to provide those opportunities. Getting students outside of the classroom together is probably the biggest thing. For the classroom superlatives that we did, if you remember, we did those outside. And getting outside of our normal environment, whether for half an hour just to, hang out in the sun, or whether that is taking students on a trip, your senior year as well, and your junior year, we did a New York City trip. And that's when I got to know a lot of the students really well and got to just have more time to understand them as individuals and everything like that. And so when we are in our musical group without having to work in that specifically musical way, I think that helps a lot with building that kind of community, getting to spend that time with each other outside of a purely musical context.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Kind of along a similar vein, how do you keep rehearsals engaging for your students?
That another $1 million question right there. I think that variety is the spice of life when it comes to rehearsal. When we are drilling the same 8 bars over and over and over and over again, that is very necessary sometimes, but making sure that you're not leaning on that too often. I think that variety really comes in keeping rehearsals fresh when we bring our own personality into rehearsals. You know, even if we're working on the same section, if it's just not getting better, those dang violas, you know what I mean? But if we keep approaching the same thing in different ways and finding just a little bit of a new angle every time, I think that can be really helpful to keep variety. I think that taking the time to pause and reflect can help to keep things fresh in the classroom as well, you know, to evaluate what we're doing as a class and not just kind of the do what I say and it'll get better model. Mm-hmm. But okay, where are we and where do we want to go and how are we going to get there? Having that kind of conversation. Because what that does is that helps students to buy in a little bit. And that puts kind of the ownership for learning in the students' hands. And with that, I find that things can just stay fresher for longer when it's not just my idea.
Yeah. What long-term goals do you have for your teaching career or performing?
Sure. Well, long-term goals for teaching, I'll start there. I am really, really loving where I'm teaching in Rockford. And I would probably, you know, if things are staying where they're at, I could see myself retiring in this job, certainly. It's a long game that I'm playing there for sure, as all educators would. But as far as doing something different, I really enjoy getting to work with student musicians every day. And I couldn't see the nature of my job changing. But as far as musical goals could go, I just want to keep providing my students the most opportunities possible while still creating something that's sustainable for myself and my students. If you build too much and have too many expectations and too many demands on the schedule, you know, students are busy. We're all busy. And to ask folks to just come in and spend time after time after time after time, it can build a really great community, and it can also just kind of burn people out. And so I feel like maintaining that balance while still maintaining plenty of opportunities is kind of my end goal of balancing and building a healthy orchestra program, if you will. Kind of both sides of that same coin of a lot of opportunities without a lot of burnout. It's a difficult thing to manage. And we're all still figuring it out, whether as students or as teachers or as whoever. But that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Did you always know that you wanted to go into teaching, or was there ever some thought of doing something different?
I think that my first goal when I was in high school thinking about what do I want to do for a career? Well, I didn't really have any idea for a long time. And then my senior year of high school, I had a kind of a mentor figure who came to me and said, Kyle, you need to do this. And I said, okay. And so this was go into music education. For whatever reason, that mentor figure saw something in me and was just speaking to me in a way that I felt was really honest, and I trusted this person, and I decided to give it a try. And I always knew since stepping foot into my music classes, like, okay, I feel like this is somewhere that I should be. And it took me a few semesters in music school to feel really comfortable with myself and seeing myself as a musician first and foremost. I had the worst performance anxiety in my freshman studio classes and things like that. And I feel like I finally came into my own after a little while. And once I did that and I grew my confidence as a performer, while still already being in this music education track, I think I saw that, oh, yes, I do have this ability. Like, I can do this. I see this in myself. And something that always really stuck with me about the idea of teaching was that I would be able to interact with people. I'm a pretty introverted person by nature, and I think that doing this as a profession helped me get out of my comfort zone a little bit, or the idea of thinking that at least I'm going to try and do this as a profession. It made me try new things. It made me get out of my shell, and it turned out to be just something that I've really enjoyed the process of so far. You know, it's a continuous experiment. And I think that is just always going to be something that sticks with me. There was a point in time where I was considering double majoring in bass performance as well as music education. And I decided not to go that route because it would have made me stick around a couple extra semesters for some credits. So I just decided to be a bass player or a music ed student who's a bass player that practices a lot and, spends that time honing those skills. And I feel like that has really paid off dividends for me in my lifetime, kind of taking that seriously while I had the right environment to do it in. So once I stepped foot into music school, I found that it was really the fit for me. I kind of walked through that door and looked around and said, okay, yeah, I think I'm okay with this. And after a while, I just ended up right in the pool.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you found your niche.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think having mentors is such a valuable thing, especially as a undergrad student or just a student in general. Really having a person that can give you guidance into the industry and just in general. So it's really great that you had that. Has there been a teaching moment that's really stuck with you or shaped how you teach today?
A teaching moment. In the classroom, I don't know of a single moment that I can really point to that has been like, oh, this right here is why I do this. I feel like some of that happens every day. Some of the interactions that you have just are kind of life-giving and fueling. And they don't even have to be innately positive. You know what I mean? It can just be, I'm experiencing humanity today with these people. And that kind of sustains how I approach things. This is just a really good feeling without being the best feeling in the world. So I don't think I can point to a single moment that has really stuck with me as shaping myself as a teacher. But I think that a lot of the individual moments throughout the day-to-day that have been really positive or even just reminding me of the humanity of students and of just the humanity of music. I think that those kinds of moments that I experience consistently continue to inspire me and continue to have me just try to come back and do my best every day. It's the little things, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. The little things really they add up to a big experience for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. As a orchestra teacher with different grade levels coming in and out of the classroom and in the same ensemble, that's got to be a tough balance sometimes to get rep that's both challenging but not super challenging, but fits everybody's, what they can play. How do you balance that? How do you balance giving out rep that's not too hard for some people, but maybe hard enough for others, and vice versa?
I think that you really have to know your students in order to select rep that is going to be the right level of challenge for your ensemble as a whole. You've got to know who you can rely on. You've got to kind of know what the strengths of your principal players are to know, how many people you think can take on that challenge. But at the same time, I feel like it's also my responsibility to make sure that I'm pushing the students who need that extra nudge. And so I'm always trying to lean to that sweet spot of having music that is just challenging enough, but it's not going to go overboard and be too tough and have students get discouraged. So kind of finding that flow state spot of just getting students to be able to engage and finding the right level of challenge. It's not an easy thing to accomplish for sure. I think that it just takes a little bit of experience in just being able to kind of read the room. Mm-hmm. You can see the looks on students' faces as they play. You can hear how they speak about the music. You can hear the laughs and see the smiles and things like that when you have the right fit. And the wrong fit doesn't look like that. Mm-hmm. So it's something that you just got to kind of feel the vibe of for a little while until you have a really good understanding of what the group in front of you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I've talked to a few other music educators, and I've had some varying opinions about this next question. What's your philosophy when it comes to assessment and grading in orchestra class? Because I know it's very like how do you judge how somebody plays, But what does that look like for you? And with that, do you do like playing assessments, playing assignments, or how do you kind of gauge that?
So at the beginning of the school year, I always tell my students just two things: that they need to have a willingness to improve their musical skills and to have a work ethic that helps support the orchestra team. And so if students can demonstrate those two things to me overall, then they're going to earn a good grade in my class. The question of how do you grade, how do you put that percentage letter-based grade on someone's playing? I mean, that is just one of those things that I don't know that we really should put that on. However, at least in my school district, I work in a system where we have to assign some sort of grade. So I do have some assignments that I give students in percentage-based grades. Concerts and performances, if you're attending your concerts, you are supporting the orchestra team. And if you have prepared for those concerts, you're improving your musical skills. So that in my grade book is evidence of students doing those two things. I do give playing assessments to students as well. And with those, it's really less about the grade and more about the feedback that I will give to them as they play for me. I really use those times just to make sure I can give them individualized feedback. And I find that that is probably the most useful thing that I can do as a teacher. So if you're turning things in, if you're showing up, you're being a team player, that's what does it grade-wise for me. Yeah, being able to refine, what's the difference between a B player, a B grade player, and a C grade player? When in music, if you're not playing the majority of your notes in tune and in time, it's going to sound off either way. So what's that difference? B, C, D? Good question. I really do think that we could use some different language for how we can evaluate that in the public school setting. I know some standards-based grading practices are probably a little more accurate for that. The 4 level on a 1 through 4 basis kind of being the top level of that, and then going to a 3, a 2, and a 1, depending on different standards that you're meeting. A lot of what I assess on in those playing assessments come from the American String Teachers Association curriculum. That's a really important resource that kind of informs a lot of my teaching practices, seeing where students should be at a certain level. And, I take that with a grain of salt for the kids that I have in front of me, of course. But that is probably where I can pull most of the evidence from. Oh, you should be doing this. This is an A. This is a B. This is this kind of scenario and situation.
I know earlier you talked about how getting students outside of the classroom really helps build their commitment to and their enjoyment of music. I remember when your first year at Wayland, I know you took us to Art Hop and had us play in little groups there, and that has been a really instrumental moment for me and helped me gain a lot of confidence and something to look forward to. What are some other ways that you'd say you use to develop confidence in your students playing?
Ooh, I have to be my students' biggest cheerleader. And sometimes that comes from putting them in situations where they need to be cheered on, like bringing students out to play for the public in small groups, right? Were you nervous during that when you played for Art Hop? Was that your first time playing in public in a small group, or?
That was my first time in a small group in a pure public setting. Mm-hmm. I was more excited because it was we got hot chocolate and we got to be in the library. Oh, yeah. And just getting to play with my friends was really fun. Mm-hmm. Also, I know we were playing some of the Nutcracker, so just pulling that out and playing a part that I haven't played before was just really fun.
Yeah. So I think that getting students to experience those kinds of situations where they can take a safe risk, a public setting like that where people are just excited to see you play, I personally feel like there's no massive downside to that sort of situation. So students can get their nerves out and they can experience what it feels like to have that really difficult moment, but then overcome it. That is, I think, probably my most used way of getting students to really build confidence in themselves. But it comes from the little things too, in the classroom, making sure to point out the positives when students are displaying something. If we're playing a section, hey, violas, that was really nice. Let's try tweaking something else this way, right? Leading with that compliment, and then, okay, here's how we're going to steer and, change the next thing. So kind of, like I said earlier, being the cheerleader and really kind of building students up in that way, I think can be just really helpful. I've also found if I do that too much, that it can kind of build a false sense of confidence sometimes. So you have to have honesty with that, right? if something really isn't going well, you have to let them know that, not just point out the good things, but it kind of package that in a way where it's still optimistic, it's still positive. I know some people, maybe in the college setting too, will have private studio teachers that are more on the tough love side. You know what I mean? They are like, okay, this needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. This needs to be fixed. And that is important. And I think that in the classroom setting, that we can do that while still maintaining the excitement for students and while still, keeping it positive to where we're bought in. I have found that going the opposite way where I'm just critic, let's fix this, let's fix this, let's fix this, without the kind of praise that needs to happen to make students feel comfortable and to make them feel accomplished, that can just get tiring after a long time. And so I think that a healthy combination of both things, but leaning on the side of optimism, is how I really do that.
Yeah, especially in the college setting, a lot of times it's critique after critique.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a bad way, but, it's there. And I remember the first semester I was in the symphony orchestra here with Joel Scott, the conductor at Grand Valley. He had come up to me after, it must have been the first concert cycle, and he was like, I know you're new here, but I see you. I see you, and I see that you're excelling and you're doing great and blah, blah, blah. And it just, it just took that extra little push, because during that semester, it was rough. I mean, I came in the winter semester, and it was like tough push. And so just getting that little boost of confidence and saying, hey, you're doing well, and I see you. I think that's really important for educators and professors and just people everywhere to be doing for their students.
Absolutely.
In the public sense or in the private sense or whatever.
If we all did that for the people around us, if we just acknowledged humanity, just imagine where the world would be,
Yeah. Yeah. That's something I try to do with my private students too, is like, that was good. It's getting better, but here's something that you could do better, blah, blah, blah. Just there has to be a balance of both in order to push them in a good way.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, really good answers on that. What is the biggest challenge you see middle or high school students facing in orchestra today?
I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but I think that the biggest challenge for middle school and high school students in orchestra classes is scheduling. There are so many time commitments on school students, and in the district where I work, there's a lot of students who are very high academic achievers. And so we'll have the kind of student in my orchestra classes who take orchestra third hour, and then first, second, fourth, fifth, and 0 hour, you've got an AP class going on. And a certain AP class may only be offered third hour, so you have to try and work that around. And let's not even mention athletic schedules. I've got those 5 AP kids on the varsity football team. And how can you do that? I can't. So, just props to some of these kids who are just out here doing the most. And that is so difficult. You guys all know as college students what a busy schedule looks like. Mm-hmm. And to have that going on sometimes without too much of a choice in the matter, I think that can be a really difficult thing to deal with, especially at a younger developmental age. So scheduling, even at the middle school level, there's so many opportunities for clubs and sports and other arts that you can be involved in. And, we have local youth orchestras that students can also be involved in. So there's more playing on top of that. And you've got your lessons and you have your everything under the sun. And so scheduling and balance is just the biggest challenge, hands down. Because these kids, they want to play. They want to do well. And I feel like everybody is just kind of spread thin.
Yeah.
It is just difficult.
Yeah, I so agree with that. I mean, look at us now. We're college students, and it's like, how did we do high school, man? Yeah. Eight classes plus extracurriculars and sports. Like, I don't know how we did it. is so bad.
It's crazy.
I did a 0 hour all of senior year.
Yeah.
6:20 a.m.
Yup.
Horrible. AP German.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. 6 a.m.
It's a great class, but it's way too early.
Oh my gosh. No, I had a friend who big time into softball, and she was in orchestra, and like she'd have a doubleheader or something, and then she'd get out of that and run to orchestra and go to the concert. Like, it is so hard scheduling with just middle school and high school. I mean,
Yes.
so much going on.
The demands of students now, as compared to when I was in high school, I feel like it is just so much more too. So it's not even just a middle school and high school problem, but it's what's happening right now in our culture, in growing up, that I think the demands are so much higher even than when I was going through it. So yeah, props to my students, props to you guys. There's a lot going on, and I just feel honored when people choose to take my class when they certainly don't have to. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Especially when we all have like jobs and stuff too.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
We're crazy over here. Crazy music students. Look at us go.
When you first started teaching, like fresh out of college, right? What was your biggest adjustment when you got your first teaching job?
Part of me wants to say the schedule at first. Getting used to day in and day out, that early wake up. But when it comes into actually teaching, I think that adjusting my expectations of what music is at different levels of development and for different experience of playing. When I first came out of college and got into my first classroom, I had just spent 5 years playing at a very high level and playing with peers that are playing at a very high level and rehearsing at a certain way. And I think that experience baked in over 5 years made it kind of difficult for me to put myself in the shoes of my students and to remember what it was like to be a beginner, to remember what it was like to first struggle with a bow hold, to remember, what's this finger called? What's this one? That sort of thing. And just adjusting how I viewed students in what feels difficult at first. That was really tough. And it takes a lot of time. And it's something that even now, as I've taught for almost a decade, I feel as if I have a better grasp on it. But sometimes you still have that moment where it's like, oh, yeah, I guess you don't know that yet. Did I teach you that yet? No? Oh, okay, here. Right? So it's less of the doing that constantly and more intermittently now, but that still kind of sticks with me of just remembering what it was like to be a student at X level of development, X level of experience.
Yeah. Switching topics a little bit. Music, I feel like, is notorious for being a high burnout rate for both, performers or teachers or students. So how do you avoid burnout personally?
I think I avoid burnout by allowing myself time to rest. Whether that is time away from practicing, time away from score study, by allowing myself time to rest while still understanding that I need to be the best musician that I can be for my students. But just taking, if on days when you're not feeling it, we still have to show up and clock in and put in the work. But when it's more than just not feeling it, making sure that we take care of ourselves, making sure that we still find some enjoyment out of it. One of the best actual practices that I do for avoiding burnout is to engage with music in a way that is totally different from the thing that's burning me out. So if I am, trying to work up like a score analysis of this piece that our top orchestra is doing, I am stepping away from that and going to play my bass guitar, just playing along with whatever tunes I'm listening to at the moment. Finding something that engages me with musicianship that is enjoyable in a different way allows me to come back to the other thing and just use a different part of my skill set. If I use that same part all the time, it just gets worn out. So you just got to give it a rest for a while.
Yeah.
On the same token, I know music can also be some of the most rewarding experiences in life. What would you say is the most rewarding part about teaching?
the most rewarding part about teaching is definitely the interaction with students. That light bulb moment that, oh, that's how that goes. There's nothing better. Getting to see that for the first time, especially when I work with younger students, getting to teach at the middle schools every morning. I get more of that there, it seems like, with the younger students. And that is just so good. You get to see people discover that kind of joy for themselves. And that really feels so rewarding. At the high school level, I think that comes from a successful run through or a successful performance where students are realizing their skills and you get that kind of click. Whereas at the younger levels, I think it's more like, oh, I get this new idea. Whereas at the older levels, it's more about, oh, I finally refined it this way. I can do these things. Both of them come to that sense of accomplishment that I get to witness. That's the fuel right there.
And what is something that you hope your students take away from orchestra, even if they don't necessarily pursue it in college?
Ooh. I hope that students can somehow find a way to engage with music throughout their life, whether that's just as an informed consumer, if you know what you like and why you like to listen to it, if that is someone who patronizes the arts, you go to concerts, you go to shows, even if you're not performing in an orchestra, if you're picking up your instrument and just playing it at home for yourself, or you are going to join a cover band or jamming with some friends here and there. Those sorts of activities where students aren't pursuing it professionally, but are still engaging with it in a positive manner. Like, that's what I really hope that my students take, is just to be able to say, yeah, I like this and I know why I like this. I'm going to do something about that.
Yeah, no, that's good. And going back to talking about mentors a little bit, who have been some of your biggest mentors and how have they influenced your career? We kind of talked about that a little bit previously, but just to name a few.
Yeah, sure. My biggest mentor, my first mentor was Karen Knopfsinger, who was my orchestra teacher when I was a student at Wayland. And I had classes with her for 7 years. And that woman is just an absolute master of community building. I remember my experience as a student. I was a pretty introverted kid, pretty standoffish. And I was that kind of student that wouldn't talk to you unless I needed something. Just like, hey, here's the business, right? Otherwise, I was content to just kind of do my own thing and be by myself in that respect. And she always just engaged with me on terms where I could feel comfortable doing that, and that's all it was. But she always knew how to check in with that sort of thing. And I feel like that has really just informed how I try to be as a teacher. I just want my students to know that they are able to, be however they want to be in my classroom and come to me when they need to, but also give them the space to not do that. Yeah, she was absolutely a huge influence for me. Another mentor figure of mine is Jim Van Isinga. He was a student teacher when I was in high school, and he was the guy who told me, hey, you need to go into music education. Just do it. Come on. And he actually didn't stop bugging me about it for a while. And I tried it, and he's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, I knew you would. Right. And so while I will say that Karen was kind of the really formative in my emotional teaching upbringing, Jim on the other side has really been formative in my technical teaching. I'd like to think that I'm kind of a blend of both of their influences in some way.
That's so cool. I love hearing that. That's great. How has teaching changed you overall as a musician?
Teaching changes you by making you realize what it is you actually know. I firmly believe that if you can teach something, then that means you really understand it. But if you can't teach something, then we have our own review to do, right? If your students aren't getting it, you need to come up with another way to help them get there. And that makes you have to engage with that same material in a different way. So my teaching's just made me more thorough as a musician. It has also made me less of a perfectionist, I think. I would always be in, when I was studying in college, taking private lessons, I was that kind of person who I wouldn't move on from this measure until I had it exactly the way I needed it to be. And in teaching students that have engaged with music at a much more casual level than I was when I was learning to be a music teacher, I think that has inspired me to let things go when I need to. Like, you know what? This passage, it's okay for now. I can come back to this. I can leave it be. And that the humanity in my own music making, my imperfections, if you will, that is not only okay, but it's what makes me unique as a musician. And so teaching has kind of helped me see both sides of that. Like, okay, I really need to know my stuff, and also when to let that stuff go and just enjoy.
Yeah. No, that's real. It really does show like how much you know and if you can teach it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. What's one piece of advice you would give your younger self when you were just starting out?
Ooh. I would tell myself to get out there. I would tell myself to go make connections. I would tell myself to just be someone who's involved. I, as a college student, was not involved with MASTA as an organization very much. MASTA is the Michigan chapter of the American String Teachers Association. And we had a chapter at Western Michigan when I was there. And I was involved with my friends on campus, but I didn't go out to MASTA camp and try to volunteer. I didn't go to any of the meetings or the string reading sessions or anything like that. And I realized that would have really helped me to get a better scope of what it is that music teachers actually do. I kind of existed in my own bubble for a while. And I think that just I would tell my younger self to get out there, go try things, go meet people, go fail, just go do it. You're never going to know if something works for you or doesn't work for you until you give yourself that opportunity to find out.
Outside of teaching, outside of playing, outside of being a musician,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do? What is your, escape from music, your little break, your free time?
Yeah, sure. My free time, I'm a gamer for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely enjoying my PC and trying to catch up on the backlog of a lot of video games right now. Outside of that, I like being active when I can. I've been running more in the past couple years or so and have done a few half marathons and have been enjoying training for that. And honestly, running is mostly an excuse to listen to music really loud while getting some exercise. So, it kind of goes hand in hand, right? You don't really ever get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoy cooking and trying new recipes, with my girlfriend, and I will get some, kind of foodies in that way, trying to cook it or going out somewhere and enjoying new dishes and things we haven't experienced like that. And just trying to travel a little bit too, whether it's little trips around Michigan, all the natural beauty we have in our state, enjoying the parks, or going further, just getting out of my own comfort zone, not only musically but in different ways. I feel like that's something I really try and make a practice of in my time outside of performing music.
It's so interesting to hear how many musicians I interview on this podcast that say they enjoy running. Pretty much like 50% or over say their hobby is running. And it shocks me. I'm like, wow, there is a lot of musicians that run. So good for you. That's great.
It's meditative.
Yeah.
One foot in front of the other. You just got to keep going.
Yeah. All right. We're almost done here. I've got 2 more questions for you, and then we'll kind of wrap up this episode. But what's one piece of advice you want students to take away from this episode or in general? And the second is, are there any books or resources you would recommend to students?
One piece of advice that I would give to students to take away is just to trust the process for yourself. If you know that you're doing the things that you need to do in order to get where you want to go, the missing ingredient is just time. We just need to take the time and kind of allow ourselves to muddle through those difficult things that you can only do with time, right? So it just is a matter of allowing yourself with that and being patient. So trust the process. As far as resources go, I absolutely recommend that students get involved with, the American String Teachers Association and just any other, organizations where they can meet folks that do what they want to do and to just find ways to plug themselves in. We aren't built individually, but we're all built throughout our process of interacting with community. And nobody is an island. And you need to meet other people. You need to do things with other people in order to just see what the world really is.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for those answers. And yeah, again, if you're not in ASTA, make sure you join ASTA. It's a great program. But that's pretty much going to wrap up today's episode. I want to thank Sam and Kayla for helping me co-host, and a big thank you to Kyle for coming out and being on this episode. It was great having you.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a pleasure to spend some time with you guys.
Of course, yeah. If you or someone you know would like to be featured on Tootie Talks, feel free to DM us on Instagram at Tootie Talks Podcast or email us at tootietalkspodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to follow us on all our socials to stay up to date on all things music, from guest highlights and upcoming episodes to behind-the-scenes content and performance clips. We're passionate about reaching as many musicians as we can, and you can help us do that. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a fellow musician, colleague, or friend, whether it's someone in your ensemble, your studio, or someone who would appreciate these conversations. Every share helps grow our community. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tootie Talks. Keep the music playing, keep the conversation going, and we will see you in the next one.